phone doesn't seem to be working. What would that be? Because can you guys just type? Mr Durie will try and restart the stream with sound this time. Oh, hold on. There we go. It was the do not disturb, I think. Alright, so. Yes, right. Alright, I think we're good now. Now it is. Thanks, Masani. Thank you, Grace. Alright, welcome. Let's see if our smoke has gone out now. Come over here. Who wants to be cameraman, guys?
I'll be cameraman.
Alright. So, if I come back here. Okay, hi guys and welcome to our Live at the Hive lockdown edition. Sorry again for that technical difficulties with the sound. Hopefully you can all hear us now. Just give us a thumbs up in the chat if you can. I'm here with Mr Griffin and Miss Durie. I can hear it now. Thanks, Grace. We're looking forward to having a look at our hive. So if you're not from Millfield Public School, or even if you are, just a reminder that these two hives here are a project that the kids have built and that we use as part of our kitchen garden program. Today we're going to have a look in this first hive just here and see how they're going in terms of their stores. The second hive we've actually looked in recently, so we know that they're doing okay. And the little baby hive down the end there is called a nuke hive. So we might get an opportunity to have a look and see how they're going in there. But all the action's going to be in this one here. So if you have any questions as we go along, be sure to leave us a comment and we'll get to them at the end. It's the end of winter, or fairly close now. So what we're hoping to see when we go into this hive is that we see that they've got enough stores to survive the last few weeks. Looking for how much honey we've got and if there's enough pollen, but also to see if the queen's in there and she started to lay. So I'm going to hand the camera off to Miss Durie and we'll go from there. Thanks. Now we're cooking with gas. We've got plenty of smoke. I don't know if you can see that, Sheridan. There's a bee there that's getting thrown out. So one of the questions the kids always have when we get down to doing an inspection is, what are the jobs that the bees do? There's one bee there that's getting kicked out, and I'm curious as to why. If you can see it there on the landing board, they're either fighting because they don't belong in the hive, or it was being ejected because it was unwell. Very COVID appropriate. All right, so first things first, we'll get Mr Griffin. He can help smoke the beehive. Now we know we use smoke for two reasons. One is that it elicits a response in the bees where they want to eat lots and lots of honey, and a happy bee is one with a full stomach of honey. The other reason is that it masks the pheromones, the way in which they talk in the hive. So the main pheromone we want to be masking today is the attack pheromone, which smells a little bit like a banana, oddly enough.
I didn't need any bananas.
There you go. A couple of puffs just in that front entrance.
This one?
Yep. That's it. That's it. And we've run out of sugarcane mulch today, so she's a bit she's not as thick as normal. If you give her too much smoke, the bees will get upset. Not enough smoke, they don't get the message. So we just want to make sure they've got the message. And we're going to take off the honey super, which is this top one here. Last time we were in here, this was fairly empty, so it should be nice and light to lift, and we'll leave it over there. For those of you at home and from Millfield, you might be able to answer this one in the chat box, Miss Durie, see if they can do that. In the honey super, something separates them from the brood box, which is this one down here. Does anyone know what the device is that separates the brood box from the honey super? See if there's an answer in the comments to that one.
Okay, we'll give them a minute. There's that little delay.
Yeah. You can be my smoker man if you want, Mr Griffin. You hold on to that smoker. They need an extra clue.
There's no responses, Mr Durie, so far.
So it's a metal special type of metal gate. It's just here. I don't know if you can see the two. So this metal gate here is called a queen excluder. That's enough. So come around this way. Can you see there's wood chip and stuff in here from when I picked up the last one?
Oh yeah. Yep.
How's that coming up on the camera? Get right in there, don't be scared. Yeah, so this is our brood box, and this metal thing is called a queen excluder. So what that does is it keeps the queen from going up into the honey super and stops her from laying eggs upstairs. Now, why do we want the queen to stay in the brood box and not lay eggs in the honey super? Because when we eat our honey, we don't necessarily want it to be too crunchy, if you get what I'm saying. Hey? Crunchy peanut butter's the thing, but not crunchy honey.
Smooth honey.
Yeah, smooth honey, runny honey. Now look, you can see here it's a little bit tricky for me to lift this off without pulling off the frames, and the reason for that is that over this winter period, this colony has done a great job of sticking it all together. Lots of wax there, which is perfectly normal. It's quite a healthy looking colony. Look at all those frames of bees. So that's good. Firstly, things are looking good. I'm just going to put this queen excluder there. Any questions coming up, Miss Durie?
No, no questions.
Still able to hear us, I hope.
Girls, can you just comment if you can still hear us talking?
They're very active.
The bees are, yeah. They're pretty calm today. So that's a lot of bees, though, for this time of year. So we might end up with the opposite problem of what I was expecting, in that we've got too many bees. And we might have to help them out, give them a little bit more space. So what we're going to do...
They can hear us, Mr Durie.
Oh, that's good.
Thanks,
Work our way
Miller.
across these frames. Do you want to scoot around the side here for me, Mr Griffin? I don't want you to hold up the entrance, because all of those bees there are on a mission, and they want to find their way home. Even though we've taken off the lid at the moment, they don't want to be held up in traffic. Can you put your finger on that frame that it's stuck to? Yeah, just push it down a little. There you go. So let's have a look at what we've got going on in here. Oh, there's not a lot of activity on the outside of it. How's it looking on the inside?
Yeah, busy.
Busy? There's the queen. Look at the queen straight away. First frame out. Can you see it there, Miss Durie, with the dot on the back of her?
Sure can.
Everyone see that at home? Lovely, calm colony. It's good. So this is a super important frame, Mr Griffin. I'm going to hand it to you in a second, and you're going to hold on to it. So what can I see here? I can see lots of pollen. Why is the queen on this frame? She might be looking somewhere to lay an egg. Not a huge amount of eggs here, so she's probably looking for space. So, which is interesting, because it would appear like this is the end frame that they're working on. There's no honey on the back, there's no eggs on the back. So when we put it back together, what we might do is move this outside frame one in, because it's totally empty, and the queen's clearly looking for somewhere to lay her eggs. So she's a beautiful queen though, isn't she?
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, Mr Griffin, do you know, or Miss Durie, you might be able to answer this one, do you know how come she's got a dot on the back of her thorax there?
Simple answer is she's a queen.
Yeah.
So
She does have a dot, but how's it got there?
Because you bought her from a breeder who put a dot on her.
Yeah, that's right. So sometimes we have queens that are marked, and it makes it a lot more easy to find them when we're doing an inspection like today. Most of the times, like our other hives, we don't have marked queens. It certainly does make it easier. Some people think it's a crown, but it's on the wrong spot of her body. I don't know who'd wear a crown on the back of their neck, but she certainly wears it proudly. And see how she's walking around the frame nice and calm. She's got a good temperament. She's not running around. She's not trying to hide. She's just doing her thing right now, looking for somewhere to lay those eggs. So really important that I'm careful with this frame. So I'm just going to clear some room, move this one out, and then I know where she is. So there you go. Pick this one up. Do you want to hold that for me, Mr Griffin? Oh, I smell that honey. Can you smell that? Is that our Indian miner behind us there, flopping around? I can hear him.
Oh, yep.
Where did the queen go? I'm just going to sit her back in, and what we're going to do is keep looking and seeing if we're finding evidence of their stores. At the moment, there's not a lot of honey that we can see. There's definitely pollen on that frame. I'm sorry again, I didn't bring the right lighter fuel this morning, so I'm struggling a little bit keeping it alight. It's no fun at all. How are they going at home, Miss Durie? Has anyone been noticing out in the garden the bees picking up any nectar and pollen in their garden? I wonder if this morning that they were out and about with this beautiful weather were lucky. There's a fair bit of bee activity. That's a good question. Do you know the answer, Miss Durie? Or should we ask if anyone knows it at home?
The girls at home might know. I've got a little bit of an idea. I'm saying the girls at home because they're the ones that are commenting. There might be some boys at home as well.
You see, Mr Durie is removing his gloves, and the reason he's doing that is not because he wants to be stung, but because he's finding it very hard to lift these frames up without hurting the bees. So, not something that you do at home, but something that Mr. Oh, look at that! It's a beautiful frame of brood. Now, because that frame's fairly empty, Mr Griffin, you see how I've lent the queen excluder up against that hive? If you want to lean that one up against the sawhorses up there, that's perfectly fine. So this frame here has got a whole heap of capped brood. Now, capped brood is baby bees waiting to hatch out. So this population, although it looks quite full today, is about to expand. So from an egg to a bee, the process is about 21 days. Now, for them to be capped over, they're at least beyond halfway. So in the next, what's that make it? 10 or 11 days, these bees will be emerging and increasing this population quite dramatically. And it's the same on the back there. Lovely calm bees. So I can understand why the queen was all the way on the outside trying to look for a spot to lay, because at the moment it's looking quite full in there. What else can I see here?
Can you have too many bees in it?
You can. Funnily enough, bees do a really good job of using the space, but once they've overpopulated the space, what they like to do is to use that opportunity to go and spread their genetics and start a new family elsewhere. Now that process is called swarming. So spring typically is when we find that bees, spring and early summer, is when they're expanding their colonies to a point where they might be able to swarm. So not straight away now, but you know, in a couple of weeks we might be looking at that type of scenario now where they've run out of room and they're wanting to start a hive elsewhere.
I just saw a little bug, little black
So
beetle.
just over here, if you can see that, Sheridan, it's a bit hard to hold without me shaking. There's a couple of little black beetles floating around here, and they're a pest. So we've got, quite a few thousand bees in this hive, but there might be, tens or 20 of these little black beetles called small hive beetle, and they're a pest. They try and benefit by laying their eggs inside a hive, and then as their babies emerge from the eggs, they eat the honey and the wax and the pollen that's around to raise their own larvae. Bees do a really good job of trying to keep them under control. They normally run them around and keep their populations down. But when you have too many of those black bugs, it can actually be really bad for the bee population. They can get to a point where it gets slimed out, it's called. It's called a slime out. At the moment, we've only seen one or two. Did you see many more than that, Mr Griffin?
No, just a couple.
So this frame here has got a lot of emerging brood. So some of those wax cappings have hatched out or emerged out. Don't hatch, and there's one there. Just see if I can get you to focus in on here. So let me move them. So this bee is just being born today. Can you see the antenna sticking out of that cell?
That's cool.
So that's her birthday, and I know it's a girl because of the shape of the cell. So I know that this is going to emerge as a female or a worker bee. And in fact, at this time of the year, it's very rare to see any boy bees. I've seen one, and I'll point it out the next time I see one, but they're not raising boys at the moment because, though boys are fantastic, I mean, might be a little bit biased in saying that, they're not overly helpful at this time of year. They don't do a lot of jobs.
What time of the year are the boys helpful, Mr Durie?
Sure.
Well, do you, are you looking for an answer to that, or is that a rhetorical question?
Yeah, leave it rhetorical.
Yeah. So look, so far so good, guys. We've got lots of bees, lots of brood, no queen cells. So that's, to answer your question, if the population gets too much, they do look to swarm. And what we can see is the sign of them raising a new queen. They don't leave a hive without there being a queen to run the place. So when they're doing that, they make this special cell called a queen cell, and that's your early signal that they're about to elope, or half of the bees with half of the honey will elope and start a new hive elsewhere. So none of that, but look, do you see how these cells, are a little bit bigger than the other ones, and there's not a lot going on in there? So they can store honey in these cells, but what they can also do is raise boys in these cells. It's called drones, another word for boy bees, so they're drone cells. But She hasn't laid in them because she mustn't be thinking that they're useful at the moment. So she's a clever queen in front of a clever colony. Now I'm just going to... Do you mind holding that for me, Mr Griffin? How are you doing with the camera, Miss Durie?
Yeah, good.
Was there any answer to our question about how far they can fly?
No, but Tiffany Wing did comment and said that my question was a very good one. Read one of the boys used for.
Yeah, well.
Cooper's very easy.
So this frame here is filled with pollen. Can you see all the different colours of pollen in there? So pollen is when they've combined it down like that, it's called bee bread, and it's their form of protein in their bees' diet. So bees will fly back after visiting flowers, and here's one. Let me see if I can get you to focus. Where we go? She was around here with pollen on their legs. I've lost her now. There she is. See the white one? See the white pollen? They'll come back to the hive with this pollen on their legs. They'll find a cell and they'll scrape it off. And if you look at this cell here, there's 2 bits of orange pollen that was scraped off earlier today. And they'll chew it up and they'll combine it with like special enzymes in their saliva, and it makes it longer lasting. I guess it increases the shelf life. But they feed this to the baby bees. So anytime there's an egg, the worker bees, like these ones here, have to go and collect it and feed it to the bees that are growing up in those cells. So it's a really important sign that this hive is healthy, to see that pollen frame.
Oscar Vaughan has answered your question via Miller Vaughan, and it's 7 kilometres from the hive, he thinks.
Yeah, so it's not too far. I mean, I would say that if they were really desperate, they would definitely fly very far. I think studies have shown 6 to 7 would be the most. I think they say on average it's about 5. Now this is an empty frame. Just to save them getting a little crowded, I'm going to put one in so that this now becomes part of the brood nest, so where they're raising bees. But Oscar, I'm very impressed, or is it Miller or whoever it was that answered it? I'm very impressed with your knowledge, mate. You've done a good job remembering that. Yeah, so 5 to 6, maybe even 7 at a stretch, kilometres away from the hive. Just had one stuck to me. Tried to sting me, I can't steal it. Yeah, not too bad. It must have tried to get me in the nail, but it didn't hurt. Yeah, so we're just going to reassemble this hive, and we'll have one last quick look at the one down there. Now, that box, when I lifted it, the honey super was very light. So I know I've got a few parents that are very, very keen for us to be doing a honey harvest, but at the moment, unfortunately, there isn't surplus nectar, and we don't want to take that, or surplus honey. We don't want to take it away from the bees until we know that they've got enough to support themselves. All right. Which is, you know, us being kind beekeepers, because we need them to be happy and healthy. So now what I'm going to do, where did that frame? Yeah, that spare one. I'm just going to pull this frame out and see if we can find the queen again, and then I'll do my manipulations. It's possible because I was so slow today that, oh, she's jumped off of this frame and onto another.
Yeah, I think she's gone.
So let me just check on the back side. So typically what I would do is, if I was really worried about the queen, I could capture her in like a cell. But if I look on the inside, I don't see her. She's on that side. I've just got to be really gentle putting things back together now, because the worst thing that I can do is squish her, because obviously she's important. Although the bees have got eggs and things in there that she could raise a new one, we like this queen and I don't want to hurt her. So just be very, very gentle. Can you hold that one for me, Mr Griffin? So, just gently moving our frames around. Is there any questions at home as to what's going on in here while we've got the hive open? This is a very healthy looking colony, lots of bees, thousands of bees. Probably, if I was to estimate, anywhere between 30 and 35, maybe 40,000 bees. And that at the moment will be probably its lowest point, because like we've just seen, there's thousands, if not more, bees that are about to emerge or hatch out. Put this empty one in.
So do they plan to do that right before spring, Mr Durie, so that they've got lots of bees for all the spring pollen, or does it just happen?
Well, I mean, there's a couple of signs that the bees look out for, and the main one is the sun. So depending on how long the sun is up in the sky, so once you pass winter solstice, which is the shortest day of the year, they start their slow spring build-up, And the reason for that is that they know that favourable weather conditions are coming. Now, we're quite lucky here in Millfield that although it does get cold of a morning, it doesn't necessarily get freezing for long periods of time. So these guys wouldn't have been too badly affected by winter. But yeah, just so that they can maximise their foraging abilities when it's time for that part of the year to happen.
Is there a reason there's so many dead ones
At the front?
at the front?
So look, it could be to do with the fact that those ones are the winter bees. So as we change season, there's quite a lot that do perish. Now the queen can lay a couple of thousand eggs a day. So, you know, even if it's building up, you could lose 900 eggs if it's increasing the population. So there's often a lot of bees that will perish in a day. And coming out of winter, it's not unusual to see a fair few bees kind of expiring as the days go on.
What was their lifespan?
So in winter, it's typically longer because they don't do as much activity. It's the foraging activity, the flying 5 and 6 Ks and bringing it back, that makes the energy kind of get consumed. In the middle of summer, they tend to last 30 to 40 days only, but in winter they can last a few months. So yeah, good question, but there are a few dead bees at the front. And I'm just putting a little bit of smoke there to chase those ones down. Do you want to keep doing that so I can put the honey super on?
A couple more questions, Mr Durie.
Yes.
Have you ever had one of your hives swarm?
Yes, I have, in fact. I have a couple of hives in my backyard, and a good beekeeper is a beekeeper who knows what their bees are doing, but an honest beekeeper is one who understands that sometimes even the best preparedness can catch you unawares. So I've had a couple of my bees swarm, and that process is pretty wild to watch. So, you know, if you can imagine 20 or 30,000 bees exiting a hive in the space of 2 or 3 minutes, it makes a tremendous noise, almost like a helicopter. And all they do is they look for a nearby branch, normally within 20 or 30 metres, and they set up a bivouac, so like a temporary camp, while they send thousands of scouts off to find their new home. They can be there anywhere between a couple of hours to a couple of days in this kind of like bivouac. Now, luckily for me, my swarm went into my neighbour's, well, I guess unlucky for my neighbour, but luckily for me, it was only about 10 minutes away. Went into my neighbour's yard on a lemon tree, and nobody was home, and I, you know, did the right thing and made sure that they were okay with me going and capturing them. So what you can do is that when they're in that swarm state and they're in the ball or the bivouac, it just looks like a big basketball. Thousands of bees kind of huddling together, keeping each other warm, making sure the queen is typically in the middle of that somewhere, making sure she's safe. You can rehome them. You can give them a box straight away. So you put a box underneath, and you know, a trained beekeeper will do this properly. So I wouldn't recommend doing it without the right gear, but you give them a box and save them the trouble of finding a home. So in that state, that's how people can increase their hives. But there are other ways, and you don't have to let your bees swarm to get to that point. But that's a great question. So none of these ones have swarmed because we're in them so often, we're able to kind of see the early signs and move things around. Any other questions, Miss Durie?
Grace Eddie's asked, what happens if the queen dies?
So the queen's job in a hive is to lay eggs. So if a queen's not in a hive, then the hive is no longer able to reproduce workers, and without workers there's not a lot of honey that comes in, and without workers there's not a lot of pollen. So they're in a state of emergency. They've got to either replace the queen, or inevitably what will happen is that that hive will dwindle in numbers and die. So there are times when a hive will go queenless, sometimes through a choice of their own. They might not like the amount of eggs that the queen is laying, and they might say, you know what, we can do better by, we can try and raise a new queen. Or a beekeeper can accidentally squish them. Like if I wasn't very careful the way in which I put that hive back together, I could roll a queen. I could push the two frames together too quickly and squish her. And when that happens, the bees need intervention, or they need to intervene themselves. So they can use an egg that she's laid in the past, feed it a special diet of royal jelly, and raise a new queen. So lucky for them, the procedure of raising a queen is a lot shorter than raising a worker brood. So instead of it taking 21 days for that to emerge, a queen can emerge in 16 days. So the special diet she's on speeds up her growth and development. So Alternatively, as a beekeeper, you can use that opportunity to put in your own queen from another hive or from a different line of genetics that you like. So.
And Masani just is asking about the crowdedness in the hive. Is there a limit of bees you can have in a hive, or do they just come to their own decisions about the limits?
Look, again, like Mr Griffin was kind of asking about earlier, if it does get too crowded, that is a sign for them that they've got a good enough population to split and go and start a new hive elsewhere. We're a long way off that. Even though that looked really full, a population of bees that's about to swarm is probably 50% more than what we just saw. There'll be bees kind of hanging out the front because they're not able to get in. There'll be bees all the way up into this honey super because there's not enough space downstairs. This one's, it's a good, healthy looking hive at this time of the year. There wasn't as much nectar as I'd like to see in there. On the outside of those pollen frames that we showed you, normally what we like to see is honey frames. And there wasn't whole honey frames. There was some nectar in there, so some surplus, but wasn't overly generous with their stores of honey. So again, another reason why we're not going to take what is left up top away today.
And Phoenix is saying hello and that he's got lots of bees on the lavender plants at their house.
Good job, Phoenix. That's good to hear, because that lavender, whether or not it's from these hives or another hive out there, that lavender is a really rich source of pollen and nectar. So lavender is a really bee-friendly plant. And these bees, like we said, 5 to 6, 7 even Ks from here, will definitely, I would imagine, Phoenix, could be visiting your lavender plant right now. They might be flying back and then flying out. So.
And Miller wants to know more about the hierarchy. So which do you consider the most important and then the second most important bee in the hive?
That's a good question. The funny thing is, people will instantly say the queen, and the queen, we've already explained how important they are for the hive, but the queen by herself will die. She can't do all of the jobs that are necessary for a hive. So it's it's a really, really hard question to answer. So it's a teamwork thing. So a colony of bees like this one relies on all of their sisters and the brothers at times to do their jobs. So
They're all essential.
they're all essential workers. Yeah, they're allowed to travel from the hive in whatever direction they want because they definitely are essential. So, look, a queen is probably the most singular important bee in the hive, but without her workers around her, feeding her, cleaning her, preparing the cells, looking after her daughters.
Replaceable.
Yeah, she can be replaceable. And I guess you're looking at a math thing there, aren't you? Like, there's only one queen, but there might be 30,000 worker bees, but, without both of them, her colony doesn't work. So, if I was to be truthful, a colony can do quite well without boy bees.
I knew that was the
Yeah,
answer, but I
that's
just
right.
didn't want to,
You didn't want to give it away. So, yeah, look, the drones, they do serve an important...
Can't be right.
Yeah, they do serve an important value in that they are spreading the genetics around the community of other hives, which is good if a hive is doing well to I guess do that service. But in terms of the hive itself, other than being a giant heat pack of a night time, they're more of a hindrance. They like to be fed, they eat lots of food, and they don't do much cleaning or nursing or building wax or any of that stuff. So still important, but their job is outside the hive. Any other questions?
Yeah, this is a great question from Vinny, even though I think I've already answered it.
Yeah.
Vinny wants to know why there is not a king bee.
Well, did you know, Vinny, for a long time there, so beekeeping's been around for centuries, and for a long time it was thought that the queen bee that we know her to be a female now was actually thought of as the king. And they used to think that hives were ruled by a king, and they didn't know for a long time that the king that they were putting up on a pedestal was actually a female and was a queen. So, look, Vinny, definitely a queen and definitely a really well-working colony of mostly females. But like I did say, the boys do serve a purpose, but their kingly duties are out of the hive. Meters in the air, kilometres away from their home. So, good question, though.
Do they have any natural predators?
Bees? Yes, they do. We were talking earlier about how sometimes birds will enjoy picking off bees' mid-flight or as they're returning to their home. You can imagine if they've just collected a whole heap of nectar, it would be a little sweet little treat of an afternoon. You know, there's a lot of pests and diseases that affect bees. I'd say the biggest thing for bees in our environment, the biggest detriment to them is us humans in the way in which we're going about clearing land and using pesticides and things. But you know, these are European bees, so their natural predators are things like you know, bears and honey badgers and stuff like that. Around here, we're quite lucky in Australia. There's not as many. There's definitely not any grizzly bears that will come and knock over our hives, but and nothing that will overly benefit from doing that. But there are a few. They yeah, I guess they serve an important role, but no bears. Not that I know of anyway.
Introduced bees.
They are, 100% are. They've been around for a long time, and a lot of our farming requires these particular bees because we've got to a point in our agriculture where we're using non-native plants to feed us. So like the flour that you eat in your bread, the fruit and the vegetables that you use all require pollination. And although there are a lot of native bees, it's not even about not enough. The different sizes of the flowers require different pollination strategies. So I've got native bees at my home, and I've got my own native beehive, and I've got these European beehives, and they can coexist quite nicely because there's such a wide variety of native to non-native plants around where I live. The issue is if you have several thousand of these beehives, then it makes it very hard for the native species to coexist because these guys are much more adept to travelling further and maybe a little bit more active. So to give you a comparison, these ones travel 5 kilometres, let's say, from the hive, but my native bees will only fly 500 metres from the hive. So you've got to make sure that you've got a lot of nectar and pollen for them close to the hive, whereas these ones it's not as not as risky. Good question, mate.
Joseph's on, he's saying hello, and Kobe Wild, and Piper's asking how long do the different bees live for?
So Mr Griffin asked that one. Let's see if he remembers.
20, no, I don't remember. It's something about 21 days.
So 21 days from egg to when they emerge, but they, like in the middle of summer, they'll last for about a month.
Oh, yeah.
Females will last about a month. Boys will last a little bit longer. Now the cool thing is that the queen lasts a lot longer. They don't have to replace her every 30 days. A good queen that's well mated with other boy bees in the area can last up to 4 to 5 years. So her job is an extendable stay. But again, it doesn't seem to bother what these girls are doing because they know that they're part of a colony that's working. So yeah, and it depends. Like if it was terrible weather and there wasn't a lot of food around, then they'd burn more energy to collect it. So we say 5Ks, but they don't want to be flying 5Ks. They'd much prefer to be flying to our veggie patch to be collecting their nectar, or our iron bark, or our fridge. That's right. Would you prefer to go to the fridge, or do you want to walk to the shop every time? So,
Joe wants to know how long they all live together for.
Yeah, so colonies can last years. So like when the queen gets to the end of her lifespan, the colony will know that she's at the end of her lifespan. It might be the pheromone that she puts out, and it might start to dwindle, and they can supersede her, which is a fancy word for saying replace her. If they don't think that she's has much life left in her, they'll use one of her eggs, so her daughters, to raise a new queen. So it's called a daughter queen. So colonies in good positions with good health that don't get impacted by pesticides or pests like the small hive beetle can be in a spot for 10, 20, 30 years. It just depends on what's going on. Drought obviously impacts them, bushfires impact them, a lack of forage will impact them, but yeah, I've definitely seen hives in trees that would have been there for 10, 20 years. So yeah, and I'd like to think that these ones, with all of the great beekeepers that Millfield has, and the many more that are learning as we're doing these things, that these will outlast our state and continue to be a good point of learning for 10, 20, 30 years to come.
Oh, good.
You know.
Lana's on as well, and she'd like to know how you split the hive and what exactly happens when you do this.
So look, we'll come away from the front. If I take this off and then it's a little bit more, you can see it. So how do we split the hive? So you're replicating a swarm happening. So we've talked about swarming happens when they get too crowded and they've got a good flush of resources and they go off and try and find a home. So a hive split is us faking that process. So instead of them finding the home, we're taking half the hive out and we're giving them a new home proactively to prevent that from happening, because you lose the ability of where they fly to. They might fly, I said, like I was lucky it flew to my neighbour's lemon tree, but they could have well flew up to the top of that tree, and then it's very hard for us to rescue them. So when you split a hive, then the one without the queen has to then raise a queen. So it takes a little bit of time for that. We've said 16 days, but even after that 16 days, the girl emerges. She has to do a series of mating flights before she's able to start laying. So it can be a month of stress for that hive before they're queen right and laying again. So, you know, and look, we've been in situations in other spots where we've established a hive and the queen has gone off on her mating flight and not returned. Whether or not she got lost, whether or not she didn't find enough boys, whether or not, you know, a bird picked her off on the way home, it's a risky time for a hive. So, yeah, it does sound simple. You take a few frames with eggs and honey and pollen and bees and you put them in a new box and they're fine, but it's a risky time. And they're incredible how they hedge their bets. They'll raise a few queens, and sometimes they'll raise so many that they actually let them out and the queens fight it out, and it's survival of the fittest inside the hive. So, yeah, but that can backfire too. If it's an evenly matched queen, then they can hurt each other and they end up making it complicated.
Well, great question, Lana. We haven't got any more questions though.
Well, we might wrap that up for this week. I think there's been a lot of stuff there, but we're happy. We're good with that. A lot of happy bees in that hive, and not as much honey as I'd like to see. So the next time we do an inspection on that hive, we'll be looking to see if they've brought in that nectar. They're certainly bringing up lots of baby bees, and that's going to be great for foraging. But let's hope that a few more of our native species come in bloom. We noticed, I think it might have been ironbark as I was driving in this morning, has started to pop now with flowers, so that's good timing for us. And I saw some bottlebrush as well. Somebody's got some bottlebrush. Yeah, lots of wattle. The Sydney wattle at the moment on the side of the road is, you know, that pop of yellow is looking good. So
Great.
I'll stop talking. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank Mr Griffin and thank you Mr Durie behind the camera.
No worries.
Good luck at home and we'll talk again soon. Bye for now.
See you guys.
Are you able to turn it off?